Welcome back to another episode of 80K Talks. I'm Jane, along with my co-host and brother Steve. Say hi, Steve.
Hi.
And we bring you the best of the Adirondacks. Whether it's a great place to stay, eat, shop, or something to experience, we're your guides to discovering the amazing things to do in New York State's 6 million acre Adirondack Park. If you love music and you love the Adirondacks, we think you're going to find today's episode captivating. Our guests are Darren Woods, the artistic director from the Seagle Festival in Schroon Lake, as well as Kate Morton, mezzo-soprano, who is an artist and performer from the Cherokee Nation and Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Did I pronounce that right, Kate?
Yeah, it's Tahlequah. Mm-hmm.
Tahlequah. Okay. Anyway, Kate has a Master of Music in Vocal Arts from the Juilliard School and is currently performing with Opera Saratoga in Saratoga Springs, New York. She was an emerging artist at the Seagle Festival in 2022 and 2023. Kate and Darren, welcome to 80K Taste.
Thanks, Jane. It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
We're so great. I'm so looking forward to talking to you. Darren, let's start with you. Can you explain to our listeners what the Seagle Festival is?
Sure, happily. We are the oldest summer vocal training program in the United States. We have our 110th season this summer. It's an intensive training program for emerging opera singers, although we do have some Broadway singers as well. So it is not what the audience gets to see are 4 to 5 fabulous productions during the summer, but really that is the tip of the iceberg. What's below the surface is the training in audition techniques and vocal techniques and acting, diction, how to set up your own business, because each one of these singers, if they're successful, they will be their own business. And so we try to give them every single thing that they don't get at a university. It was founded by Oscar Seagle in 1915. It continued on with his son in the 40s up till in the 80s. I was a student here, an emerging artist in 1980, 45 years ago. So Seagle is deep in my blood. I was the first general director that wasn't a family member. There were some artistic directors before me, but this is my 30th summer as artistic director of Seagle Festival. So it is the place to train if you want to become an opera singer in the country.
That's amazing. I think in a lot of professions, not just musical performance, you go and get your education and craft, but there's not a lot of teaching of, okay, how do you actually execute this? Like
right.
Lawyers is a great example. A friend of mine taught at a law school where she wasn't a professor of law, but she was teaching kids how you prepare for a case, how you argue things, how you do, the different techniques that attorneys need. So that I can see that being a really important factor. Let's talk about Oscar Seagle for a little bit. I know that he used to come up here on vacation and he taught classes at what's now the Lodge at Schroon Lake, but used to be, they called it the Brown Swan.
Brown Swan, correct.
And when I did a little bit more research preparing for this episode, I expected this deep opera background kind of thing, but he also was kind of a popular singer of his time. He was a baritone.
Yeah.
And he sang and recorded and was what would be considered pop music for the time.
Yeah, he started out as an opera singer and he went to Paris to study with the great tenor John Duresca. And he and his wife Nell would go to Europe for the fall and winter months and study. And he became so good at that technique that he was allowed to teach Duresca's technique. And so he really brought that European technique of singing to America. So when Seagle first started, it was teaching the Seagle-Duresca or the Duresca-Seagle technique to opera singers and famous opera singers in America. The reason we ended up in the Adirondacks is in New York City back at the turn of the century and in the early 1900s, there was no air conditioning and everything shut down and people started coming to the north. Marcella Sembrick was up here teaching voice. So he started in 1915. They started at The Hague in 15 and 16, where he was in a rooming house. And unlike today, where the singers come for 9 or 10 weeks, all the singers are here all the time. If you were a student of Oscar's, you would come for 2 weeks and you would have a voice lesson every day, and then the next crew would come in. So sometimes there were 100, 150 people who would come during the summer. We might have ended up in The Hague if Mrs. Seagle had like the lady who owned the rooming house a little bit better, but as things go, that didn't happen. And he's happened to know the guy who was building the resort, the Brown Swan Club. So in 1917, when this opened, he had a little house up there. And every night he and Nell would take rides up Charlie Hill Road in the carriage for after dinner. Well, after 2 years at the Brown Swan Club, the owner said, having singers sing at 8 o'clock in the morning at a resort is probably not the best thing to have happen. And in the meantime, he had, as you learned, he was a big recording artist of popular music. He'd recorded this sappy World War I ballad called Old Pal of Mine. And in 1919, I believe, a check arrived from Columbia Records for him for $90,000.
Wow.
That's probably 3.9 million today.
Wow.
And so he went up Charlie Hill Road and bought the two farms that we occupy to this day that he had been admiring on his carriage rides. So I think after the renovations and everything, they finally opened up there probably in around 1922. He ran the program, only voice lessons, no, and maybe some concerts, no opera. But his son John really wanted to do opera, so they would go take cars and the whole company down to Camp Wickiosco in Lake George and do shows there. When Oscar died in 1946, they built what is now the Stage House and started doing operas. It was called the Seagle Colony Opera Guild back in that day. That very summer, that very winter, this winter after it was built, the hardest freeze and snow came, and the entire building fell in except for the 200-year-old barn that was
Wow.
Oscar's studio. So John brought a wealthy Texan up, and they were playing bridge on the porch, and he finally said, I guess you need somebody to pay to repair that. So the man wrote a check to completely repair the theater, and that is the theater that we occupy today. So Oscar started this wonderful, amazing thing, and we have tried to stay as true to the mission of Oscar and John and the Colony or Seagle Festival as it has been for 110 years. But obviously, modernizing and sort of keeping up with what the business requires of the artists now. You don't just have to sing pretty. That's just step one. So now it's all the other stuff. But that's Oscar Siegel's history in a nutshell.
That's great. That's great. It's funny because my dog groomer, the amazing Carissa at Adirondack Grooming, is located at the top of Charlie Hill Road, which sort of runs parallel to, Steve, what is it, Route 8?
Route 9.
Is that
Yeah.
9? 9?
Yeah.
It runs parallel to Route 9 and has the most spectacular views of Schroon Lake up there. Like
Yeah.
it's almost better than being lakefront. It's just so magnificent. But the campus itself is actually, you were saying earlier, 40 acres.
Yeah.
And it's the theater. It's where the artists stay all summer. It's like we're saying dining hall, not just like a summer camp. It's also a boot camp.
Yeah, it's opera boot camp.
So it's,
Kate can attest to that.
yeah. So it's not just like this, little quaint little theater and people perform. It's a whole ecosystem of training and performance, and it's really amazing. What do you think sets the Seagle apart from other vocal training programs?
I think that, I said this last night, we saw all of them for the first time last night. We go through all the rules of the campus. And at the end of the evening, I say, congratulations, you all made it. So of the 500 applicants, you're the 30 people we picked. So there's no jealousy. There's no one-upmanship. We are all here because we have something to learn. But also the real secret sauce is, I say to them, there is no failure here except failure to try. This is the place to risk everything in your performance, because if you can't do it, we're going to pick you up and give you a hug and show you how to do it and help you climb whatever mountain that you're here to climb. We give them the freedom to risk everything and make mistakes. Every teacher here every member of the faculty and crew is taught that we teach from yes. We do not teach from no. So many universities are territorial, and it's just like, you can't do that, and don't do that, and you shouldn't do that. And we don't do that. We invite the artists to explore everything. In audition classes, I mean, they get up several times a summer and they sing, they get dressed up just like they would a New York audition. They sing their first piece, we pick their second piece, we give them criticism right after that to help them improve that. None of the criticism is that was bad. what you were saying at that Ari, at that point, I didn't really understand what you were telling me. So why don't we talk about that? And then we go coach them on it. But it makes them lean, mean audition machines when they
That's
go out in the
great.
cool world. And Kate can really speak to that. But it is the permission to not be perfect.
That's great. My dad always used to tell us if when we would ski and we're learning to ski, if you don't fall down, you're not trying hard enough. So that's a
Right.
great example. So
I thought it
let's
was just being mean.
So, Kate, let's turn the tables a little bit. As a recent performer at Seagle, tell us about your musical journey. What first drew you to opera and musical theater? Was there a moment when you knew this would be your life's path?
I grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and my first experience with opera and musical theater was with my first voice teacher, who is Barbara McAllister. And she's a retired opera singer, and she had an incredible career all over Europe, and she lived in New York for 20 years. And when she retired, she decided to come back home to the Cherokee Nation and give free voice lessons to Cherokee voice students. And so I had the honor of being one of her students, and she's been one of my greatest mentors. And she's the one that really introduced me into the possibility of being able to sing opera and musical theater. Because my first experience performing, when the moment that I knew that I wanted to sing, was whenever I got up and volunteered to sing a solo at a church in Jay, Oklahoma. We would go with the Cherokee National Youth Choir. I was a member at the time, and we would go to singings at rural churches, and they would be entirely in Cherokee, the
Wow.
singing and the sermon.
Hmm.
And I volunteered to sing Amazing Grace in Cherokee without thinking
Oh,
about it.
Wow.
And well, I certainly thought about it when I got up to the podium. I was like, what am I doing? Why did I do this? And I remember I sang with my eyes closed the whole time, and then I opened them while I was singing the second verse, and everybody else was singing with me and standing up.
oh,
And it was a moment where I thought to myself, this is the medium with which I will tell stories. That's always the way that I've looked at singing, is just stories have to be told through this medium.
That's
cool.
amazing. How did you find out about Seagull? What drew you to the
Mhm.
program?
I went to undergrad at Oklahoma City University, and I studied music theater and vocal performance there. And my voice teacher there at the time recommended that I apply to the Seagle Festival because there have been several people from OCU who had gone before, like Mary Beth Nelson and Aaron LaCroix. And so they recommended that I apply. And so I looked it up and I applied, and I asked about it. I asked around, and I heard only good things. And then I was really fortunate to be accepted.
That's amazing. How did the experience at Seagull compare to other training
Mm,
programs that you may have had prior?
yeah, this training program was first of all, it's on Charlie Hill Road, and it's just like this little pocket of beautiful theater surrounded by woods and trees. And so it's like, in my mind, one of the most perfect environments to grow as an artist, because I love that type of intimacy that comes with that type of community. I also found that the season is something that really motivated me as a performer, because during the season, they try to do a standard piece, a standard operatic piece, and then a musical, and then a new work. And that's something that you don't really see a lot in a lot of other programs. And that's one of the reasons why I was really drawn to them, because I was really questioning, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do standard or musicals or contemporary works? And then because of the Seagull Festival, I realized that, oh, I want to do all of them.
Hmm.
And so they made it really possible to see it that way.
And it's like that, as Darren was saying earlier, it gives you that opportunity to um, try things and
Absolutely.
maybe not succeed 100%, but maybe also in the process discover something you didn't know before. Uh,
Absolutely.
What was one of the most valuable aspects of the program for you personally?
One of the most valuable aspects. It really is like opera boot camp. So I learned a lot of really valuable things being a part of it. I would honestly say it's On a personal note, not only as a performer, and like Darren mentioned earlier, we're our own business. We're having to market ourselves and show the world who we are. I think also the most important thing is that there's really a family that's created here. I just got together with one of my best friends that we were there for the same 2 summers in 2022 and 2023, and she's now one of my best friends in the world, and she just came and visited me here in Saratoga for this summer, and we got to hang out for 5 hours and we didn't stop talking for one moment.
Ah,
And I still have so much support from people in Scroon Lake that are involved with the Seagle Festival. They'll message me or keep up with me whenever I post on my website or post on Facebook or Instagram, and they'll keep in touch with me and let me know that they're supporting me. And it really has been, I've earned and gained such a fantastic family from
that's
being a
lovely.
part of the Seagle Festival for 2 years.
That family thing is what we really, really try to build. One of
Mm-hmm.
my favorite pictures ever was a few years ago. There were 8 singers in Berlin in a pub. None of them had been here together, and yet they had all found each other in Berlin and gotten to beer together, and they took a picture and sent it to us. And they said, wherever you go, there's a Siegel family member who's got your back, even if you didn't know they
Mm-hmm.
were going to be there.
Neat.
Absolutely. And also during audition season, I think I text Darren every single year. I'll be like, "Thank you for audition class," every morning because now I can do a 10 a.m. audition. And then
Audition classes at 9 o'clock in the morning, just so
Oh,
you know. And even
so
Emily Richter, who was one of the winners of the Met last year, she sent me a text and she said, "Okay, my semifinal time is 10 o'clock in the morning. Thank you for dragging us all out of bed at 9 o'clock and making us sing so early because I got this."
yeah,
And then she won.
absolutely.
that's incredible. Darren, you're the artistic director. So, what does that really mean?
It means I get the fun of picking the repertoire and picking the singers, and along with my colleague Tony Kostecki, who's our general director, but also a wonderful musician and pianist. And I do want to say something about every decision that we make at Siegel is artist focused. And we are so lucky that our audience just comes along. So we are never going to go, okay, what is going to sell the most tickets? What is our audience going to enjoy the most? We say, what is going to be the best 4 productions for us to do that is going to bring these artists to the next level? We try to announce, early in the season, so this in the fall, so the singers know what we're doing. But what will happen this year is I'll be watching the singers and thinking, okay, those 8 singers are going to be coming back next year, and what's going to advance their careers. So sometime this year, you know, we're doing Carmen, and we haven't done that in 25 years. So,
Wow.
but I had a bass baritone and I had a tenor, which is key, and some mezzos. And I was like, I think a Carmen cast is forming in my head now. So we really sort of try to look at the second and third year singers that are coming back and really build the season around them, and then fill in with the first year singers. And then the first year singers will be coming back the next year. But every decision, every repertoire decision is made with only the singers in mind. As I'll tell you a funny anecdote. This happened, 29 years ago when I was young and green and just making all this up as artistic director. But I decided to do Madame Butterfly. I know, stupid. You don't want young singers to do Madame Butterfly, but we did it. And someone came up and said, after Act One, and said, "Please don't encourage that young lady to be a singer." And I said, "Wait just a second." And I went to the box office and I got the $10 bill. That's what it cost back then. And I handed her money and I said, "If you don't understand that this is about her journey and not yours, then you don't need to be here. So please leave the theater." Well, Scroon Lake being Scroon Lake, it got all over town that I would throw you out of the theater if you talked about my singers. And it's not quite true, but word does get around. But the audience is so wonderful in that they are there to watch from this weekend when we have Old Friends concert, to watch those singers for the first time and watch them grow through the productions over the course of 9 weeks. And the audience is behind that growth, and it doesn't matter what we're producing. They want to come see it and watch that growth. So we are the luckiest opera company, music theater company on earth, because our audience says, do what you want for the artists and we will come and join you and watch them on their journey.
That's a really cool way of thinking about it. That's awesome. You mentioned you're going to do Carmen this season.
right?
What else are you looking forward to? What else is happening?
Yeah, it's a great season. As Kate said, we always try to do two book musicals or an operetta and a musical. And we always do a traditional opera and an American opera. And I always have every singer has to be in the first show and every singer has to be in the last show. They don't bond if everybody's not working toward a common goal right from the get-go. So everybody's in the first show, everybody's in the chorus. If you're the star in the first show, you're in the chorus the second show. So there's no divas. We're
Hmm.
all on the same playing level. So we're opening in the weekend after the 4th of July on July 9th with the Pirates of Penzance. Gilbert Sullivan's
Yeah.
hilariously funny piece. I used to sing the Major General, so I love Pirates of Penzance. 2 weeks later, on July 23rd through 26th, is Carmen by Bizet. And then in August 6th through 9th, we're doing a piece called Mayo Buckner by Tom Chiapullo. It's only had one production in its history. It won the Pellicciati Prize at Crane School of Music, so it was commissioned by Crane. They had a production of that in 2019, and there were rumblings of other opera companies doing it. And then COVID happened and the world shut down. And so all of those plans were changed. And so this beautiful opera about this young boy whose parents took him at age 8 to the Iowa Home for Feeble-Minded Children.
Mm.
When he wasn't that, he played 8 instruments. He probably would have been on the spectrum back in the late 1800s, but they didn't know. And how he grew up and made a life for himself in this institution. It's beautiful, incredibly beautiful music, and shows victory and joy in a very unfortunate situation. By Tom Chiapullo, the composer will be here because I love for the singers to work with the composer. They can't talk to Mozart, but they can talk to Tom Chiapullo about what he did and what he was writing. And then we're closing with Anything Goes, one of my favorite Cole Porter musicals. All 32 of them will be tap dancing.
Whoa,
And that
no.
is yes, they will be. That is August 20 through 23. But we're also doing some other things. We're doing a Seagle 110 American concert at the Screenlit Community Church. See it on our website. And that's a free concert that we're going to use for donation to benefit the Screenlit Food Bank. We have a children's opera that tours all over the North Country called Monkey and Francine in the City of Tigers, which I love because at the beginning of this little opera, Francine's parents, the Monkey King and King Queen, say, they'll tell their son that he's going to rule the kingdom. And Francine says, well, I'd like to rule the kingdom. And they say, oh, don't be silly. Girls don't rule the kingdom. Boys do. And then Francine saves the village. And the parents go, wow, girls can rule the kingdom. So a little bit of empowering going on there. It's a really great piece by Kamala Sankram. She's Indian American. And so it's got lots of beautiful Asian and Indian tonalities in it. So it's a real treat. We did it 6 years ago, and it's one of the biggest hits that the kids have had. And again, it will be all over the North Country. Look for most times it's free in different libraries all summer long.
Oh, great. I am going to look for that. Kate,
Hey, Jane,
yes, Steve.
both Kate and Darren have mentioned their websites, but we haven't told our listeners what
Oh,
the addresses are. Maybe we
that's
could.
that's a good point. It's Seagle and everybody misspells it. So it's SEAGLE festival.org, seaglefestival.org. And all of the shows are there. You can buy tickets online. Everything's there.
And Kate,
My website is kateraquelmorton.com, and you can see a little bit more about me and some videos I have online.
I highly recommend. Both sites are chock full of information. Kate, I listened to several of your performances, which was so cool and added dimension. And thanks, Steve, for your always timely reminder to mention
I
websites.
try. I try.
Kate, listening to Darren just describe the season between the opera, the modern performance, the tap dancing. I mean, what was that like from your perspective when you were there? Were you challenged to do things? Like if you were called on to tap dance, could you tap dance?
Oh, it's such a great question. I've tap danced since I was 3 years old.
Okay.
So,
Oh, wow.
so actually, that season sounds like a dream. I don't know if you saw me nodding my head to
I
anything
did.
goes,
I did. When
but
as soon as he said tap dancing, your face lit up. But keep going. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's it. Like that sounds like a dream to me. So, no, that's the thing about it too, is that they celebrate versatility too at Seagull Festival. They don't, like Darren mentioned earlier, they don't say no. They're very
Mm.
a yes company. If I
Yeah.
showed up, if I showed up and I told Darren, I said, listen, I want to do this and this and this, and I want to showcase tap dancing in this musical. And he said, okay, looks like there's a role for you. Do it. He's
Wow.
just that type of person who would support his artists.
We've already had like 2 or 3 singers say, I don't dance. I can't dance. I'm like, but you'll be able to, because
Yeah.
we don't tell them that they can't do it. And
Mm-mm.
we're going to show them how to do it. And they'll be doing it and loving it by the time the summer's over.
Absolutely. And then whenever somebody asks them later on in their career too, can you dance? Then you can be like, yes, strong mover. I can do it.
Strong mover. Okay, that sounds like lingo. I like that. Oh, yes, I'm a strong mover. Beyond performances, does Seagle put
Hmm.
on any behind the scene events, talks, or to engage the
Yeah.
community more deeply?
Before now we have a new company manager, Josh Cook, who's also acting as director of education. We used to always have, like we always have before each opera, because they're less familiar, an hour before the show, a pre-show talk, pre-show lecture. Well, Josh wants to do it for every show. So all the main stage shows, Pirates, Carmen, Mayo, and Anything Goes, Josh is going to walk you through the history and some fun facts about it, play a little music. Josh was a singer here for 2 years and an assistant stage director. So his DNA is deep in the Seagle Festival as well. So that's open to the public. For one of our levels of donors, we have what we call Coffee and Conversation, which is the Monday before a show opens. And it's a real deep dive for some of our donors to get to meet the cast, to hear a little bit more about the show, to hear some singing up close and personal. This weekend, the 28th of June, for After Old Friends and New, which is the introduction of all the singers to the world, to the Adirondacks. We have a reception afterwards where all the audience is invited. They can come and have some food and talk to the singers and mingle and visit. I think another one of the really special things, Kate sort of alluded to it, is we want our artists to have access to our audience and our audience to have access to our artists. And that's why we have such great support in the area, because people don't mind, like they'll see one of our artists on the street and they'll go up and say, oh, I just saw you last night in a show and I thank you so much for being here. And the give and take between the artists and the patrons and the audience is just so special. And
I
as Kate
love that.
said, we have people that have flown all over the world, literally, to see the singers that they met here, just to support them. It's remarkable. And it's unlike, I ran opera. I sang for years and I ran opera companies for years. There's nothing like it in the world. I can absolutely tell you that.
That's great. Kate and Darren, chime in on this too. I'd be interested in getting your perspective on, for one of our listeners who has never attended a Seagle Festival performance, what should they expect, or any advice for first-time opera goers?
It's funny. Opera is such a scary word, and it doesn't need to be. And
Mm-hmm.
for those of you who, yes, we're going to do Carmen in French, but if you go to a foreign film, there's, the English translation on the foreign film. We do surtitles for all of our operas, whether it's in English or in a foreign language. So if you're in doubt of what to do, just look up there and you'll see the translation up there. But moreover, it's just another way of storytelling. Like Kate
Mm-hmm.
said, a music theater's a way of storytelling. Opera's a way of storytelling. One of the aspects that Kate alluded to, and it's very dear to me, is American opera and how much we devote ourselves to that. American opera is a hybrid of traditional opera and the American musical theater. It's where they're meeting. It didn't used to be that way probably 30 years ago, but as contemporary composers like Mark Adamo and Jake Heggie and Tom Chiapullo and Missy Mazzulli are
Hmm.
now being performed at the Met. The combination of cinematic music and musical theater music and opera music are all synthesized. And
Mm-hmm.
so it really is our own, like music theater, it is our own new operatic art form. And it's why I'm so, so passionate about it. But don't be scared. And also, you're going to find a welcoming audience. We have volunteers that will greet you at the door and help you find your seat. And all the singers stay after the show in the lawn after the show and greet the audience. So if you do come for the first time, be sure and stay afterwards. And Kate and all the people will come out and you can applaud them. They will talk to you. So again, it's just a real family feeling, even for the newcomer.
Mm.
That's great.
Did I miss anything, Kate?
No, I don't think so. I love the fact that you talked about American opera because I feel like being a part of the Seagle Festival is actually my first experience with that. And that's why I fell in love with it because my first summer we did Fellow Travelers and I wasn't in it and I wasn't a part of the production, but I went and I supported my friends who were a part of it. And I remember the opera was just going on and I just started crying because of the
Mm,
story. And and it was just an aha moment for me of where I was like, ah, this is like the type of story and the type of characters that I've been wanting to see in opera. And it's in American opera too. And so,
And the
yeah,
next year you got to be in the American Opera.
I did. Yeah. And we got to meet the composer and the librettist as well.
that sounds like this that Siegel does a lot to sort of nurture new music.
Hmm.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's a passion of mine, and as we grow now, when we do a fall season, which is largely educational, we take shows into schools and do a review. But the fall is also dedicated to workshops of operas that are in progress. We're
Mm,
doing one this summer that's based on Theremin, who created the theremin instrument, but also
yeah.
was thought to be a Soviet spy, and he disappeared, and so it's a really interesting story. I'm just hearing the music for the first time. We have workshopped several of Evan Mack's pieces, who is an Adirondack composer, but
Oh,
also
wow.
world known. So, and the audience here, it has become a very savvy recipient of new American work. So when we do these workshops, our theater will be full of people. And so when we do the workshop, we'll do it. And then I go and lead a feedback session. So the artists, the composers can ask the audience what they understood, what they didn't. And so our audience and our artists actually help shape these pieces that we're workshopping so that when they come back into the world as full-fledged pieces, you can see little pieces of what and we call that portion of
Hmm.
our program, we branded the American Center for New Work Development. And as we expand our campus, which we have plans to in the future having a new theater and year-round artist housing where we can actually, have a composer come for 2 or 3 weeks and write and then bring singers up and have them sing what's happening. So, like we develop artists, singing artists and technical artists, the next thing we want to do is really start the real developmental program for young composers and librettists to sort of cut their teeth here as our singing artists and our technical artists have.
One thing that just popped into my head and who's providing do you have an orchestra? I mean, who's providing the music?
No, we have brilliant, brilliant, brilliant pianists.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
collaborative pianists, and they are so good. Everything is done with two pianos, and sometimes, like last year, we did Coal Mountain, and we didn't want to have real gunshots in that little theater, so we had percussion. So sometimes the second pianist will play percussion, but each pianist has is lead on one of the shows,
Okay.
and they're second on the other show. And the second pianist basically takes the orchestral score and fills in what's not on the piano vocal score. So it has a more orchestral feel to it. So it's all done with these incredibly brilliant. I can't say enough about our amazing pianists. I mean, Kate and all the singers get coachings with them all summer long, as well as working with them in the show.
Hmm.
So there's individual instruction that they give as well.
Oh, that's great. So, yeah, Kate, you have a unique and fascinating story. Can you tell us more about your roots? You touched it a little bit
Hmm.
on your Cherokee heritage, but tell us some more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the capital of the Cherokee Nation. I lived for a while in Stillwell, Oklahoma. That's where I was raised, and my grandparents still live there. And I am Cherokee on my father's side of the family, and my grandmother served on the tribal council, which is a form of our government.
Right.
And my grandfather was head of education for 20 years. And so I also have family members who are involved in the cultural aspects as well. Like I have an aunt who is a Cherokee National Treasure in basket weaving. And so I
Cool.
grew up with this sort of influence of different involvements within the Cherokee Nation, but each and every one of them was doing their part to be involved and foster more involvement in the Cherokee Nation and sharing the culture and making it better for future generations. And so then I wanted to do that as well. I was always so inspired. And I've always known for a long time that I wanted to be a storyteller because whenever I was in middle school, we had traditional storytellers like Robert Lewis and Tommy Wildcat that would come to the schools and they would tell us some of the traditional stories. And I remember like being enthralled by it, and it was just he was using different voices and he was really acting it out. And it was a moment for me of where I thought to myself, "Oh, I want to be a storyteller, but I don't know like how." And
Mhm.
so then that's where that experience of singing in that church and outside of Jay, Oklahoma, that's where that comes into play because that was the moment where I figured out, oh, music, that will be the vehicle for me.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And
Yeah.
I read also in October of last year,
Mm-hmm.
you took part in the first opera performed entirely in a Native American language.
I
Talk
did.
about that experience. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, last October I performed in the first opera, which was performed entirely in a native language, and it was performed in Chickasaw. And the opera is called Luxie Shawley, a shell shaker opera, and it was written by Chickasaw classical composer Jared and Pichichaha Tate,
Woo!
who is
Okay,
She's amazing.
I
She's
have to
amazing.
admit, I knew all of that stuff and I was like, there's no way
Mhm.
I'm gonna try and pronounce any of those words. So that's
That's
awesome.
all right. And it was the utmost honor to have been involved in that and to have Jared ask me to be a part of that. And I got to workshop and originate and premiere the role of Loxie in Loxie Shawley, which means turtle. And it's about this young girl named Loxie who has to leave her tribe in its moment of strife, and it's in a new period of time, and she has to leave her tribe because everybody's telling her, oh, you're too slow, nobody's listening to you, nobody cares what you're dreaming about. And she has to leave, and she has to learn all these different lessons from all the animals along her journey. And she meets grandmother turtle later on who teaches her some invaluable lessons, and she finds a best friend. And then eventually, Grandmother Turtle passes on,
Mhm.
and it's time to return back to her tribe and bring all of these things that she's learned about herself and bring them back for the prosperity of her tribe. And
Wow.
so I got to play that character, and she's in the forest for a long time. And that was something that I focused on a lot, and a question that somebody asked me last October, and that was, Loxie has a long time in the forest, and how do you relate to her on that level? How does it, do you ever feel like you're in the forest? And it was such a question that I still haven't fully answered because I still feel like I'm in the forest. I
Mhm.
don't know that I'm quite out of it yet. I feel like there's still more things to learn. But I've just finished my master's at Juilliard, and I'm going to be based in Oklahoma next year. And I'm going to be back with the Cherokee Nation and bringing these tools that I've learned. And I think that that'll be the start of
Do you,
finding my way out of the forest.
that's, I love that. I love that metaphor. Do you see yourself staying in Oklahoma or do you see yourself moving around?
Who knows? Who
Who
knows
knows?
what the
Okay.
world will? Who knows? I'm open, but I'd like to be closer to my tribe. I'd like to be back. That's my home. Those are my roots. And I'd like to be closer to my tribe. I also do a lot of work with, whenever I got into opera and in performing, there really was not a lot of representation of native languages, especially the Cherokee language too. And that's whenever I found Lewis Ballard, who was a
Hmm.
prolific composer and a Cherokee composer. And I got a couple of his sheet music, but I just wanted more. And so then I started doing more collaborations with Cherokee composers and figuring out ways to get Cherokee stories in the Cherokee language into the classical music world. And most recently, I did a collaboration with Wilma Mankiller's estate. She has a published book of poetry it's published by her estate and Clyde Hill Publishing. And I had the opportunity to premiere a new song cycle, which included 5 of her poems.
Wow. Oh,
Mhm.
how old are you? I like,
I'm 25.
oh my goodness, you've done so much. That's incredible. That's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah, they
I
all think that 25 is old, but I can tell
Yeah.
you that it
I
is
can
not.
tell you it's
I'm
not. I
not. I'm
know.
25. You got me. But my first avenue into that was in my undergrad. I had to give a senior recital at Oklahoma City University, and I had to give a recital for musical theater and for vocal performance. And in my vocal performance, I wanted to sing in Cherokee because that's how I started. But everything was a cappella because
Mm,
everything's traditionally sung a cappella. Or if you want to get fancy, a guitar. But I wanted to figure out a way to build that relationship between that classical music and the Cherokee language, and to figure out how to foster that sort of avenue for it as well, to share it with more audiences. And so I had 3 songs, Orphan Child, North Wind, and One Drop of Blood, arranged for piano and cello into a short song cycle called Kanohaleski Junilosahi, which means stories from where they journeyed from. And I premiered those, and it really ignited that sort of passion of mine, which is to share the Cherokee language through this new avenue of music.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Shifting to performance and the Seagle Festival, or maybe
Hmm.
I have not attended Opera Saratoga before, but how do you approach connecting with audiences in a smaller, more intimate venue like the Oscar Siegel Memorial Theater, especially to patrons who might be sort of new to opera or new to musical performance?
Absolutely. I truly love an intimate setting. Like I mentioned earlier, this is such a community of people who are there because they want to support you and they love to support you, and they will continue to do so during the performance and after the performance. And so I love the intimacy of it. I feel like it's very personal, and I feel like they get to see me fully as an artist. And how
Mm,
many times in your life are you going to be that close or that intimate with this thing called opera and
right.
musical theater? And Darren kind of mentioned it earlier, but there is this sort of um, moment of that happens when somebody says opera, because it seems like this other thing, like it's quite not quite reachable if you haven't been raised surrounded by it. But I recently I did a master class with Andy Einhorn, and he said something that stuck with me, and it was about bridging that gap between opera and musical theater. And he said that at the end of the day, they're both music that's happening in a theater.
Mm.
And I think that's a great way to think at it
Yeah.
about it, especially if you're new to opera or anything like that. I certainly didn't know anything about opera until I was 14, and it was all because of Barbara McAllister. So I wouldn't be too nervous about being knowing enough or not knowing enough. I think really if you're there to hear some beautiful people, meet some fantastic folks, listen to some incredible stories, and get exposed to a really great supportive community, then I really think that's what you should think about when you're debating
That's
whether or not to go watch at the theater.
that's such a great way of looking at it. We love a good backstage story. Do you have any
Oh yeah.
good, funny, memorable, or even magical
Oh,
moments you can share that's something that the audience would have never seen? But I'm sure
Oh
there's probably
God,
so
there's
many. Yeah, both of you have.
there
oh
was
yeah.
when I was a singer here back in 1980, I did How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which is funny because it's the window washer that takes over the company. And then, 20 years later, that's what I did. But I was on stage and there's a character brings on a bouquet of flowers and she gives it to me and says, happy anniversary, Ponty, it's your first week. And then the next 2 pages of dialogue are about those flowers. Well, back in the 1980, 45 years ago, there was no prop person. There was no curtain puller. It was just the singers and Richard Kagi, who's still here as our director of production. And he used to stand in the back of the theater and smoke and be nervous and walk in on the porch in the back. So we could see him like one of those ducks in an arcade
Oh,
going
that's
back and forth.
hilarious.
And the girl came out and she didn't have the flowers. And she just said, happy anniversary, Ponty. And so I had to make up 2 pages of dialogue praying that the person who was going to come on next was listening so he could come on. And that guy was known for not really always learning his lines. And so I watched Richard just stop in the window smoking, thinking, how the heck is he going to get out of that? And I was like, Jonesy, is that a new hairdo? And we did 2 pages of dialogue about a hairdo instead of roses. And then the guy came on and goes, say, Jonesy, is that a new hairdo? Bet you've been got lots of compliments. And we went on. And Richard said, oh, thank God. I didn't know how you guys were getting out of that. But that's one of the millions of stories that I have, but the one that comes to mind first.
Kate, what about you?
Oh my goodness. I just had like 100 different moments pop in my head where we're all laughing backstage in that little area. We when we're backstage at Seagle, I had some of the best friends ever. And I think some of my favorite moments, it's a nice little sweet one, but anytime they would come off stage, like one of my friends and the three other of us were there. I remember one time it was Thomas Valenti. He was coming off stage, and it was me and Lindsay and Emily waiting there for him. And he just comes off stage and immediately just like barrels into us and hugged us. And it was one of the sweetest moments. I think it was one of the last performances, but I'll never forget that moment of just pure love and happiness. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
sweet.
awesome. That's lovely. Kate, during your 2 summers in
Hmm.
Screw Lake, or you're rehearsing by day, performing by night.
Oh yeah.
What was your ideal day off?
Well, my ideal day off would be to wake up really early and go on a hike first with Darren. And then I'd go on a hike, and then after that I would get myself a really great dinner at Sticks and Stones, and I'd get the Cajun chicken pasta. And then
We called that her formal dining room, Sticks and
Oh, that's
Stones.
so funny.
I have a routine, and if something's good, why change it? And so
Exactly.
that's what I do. And then, sometimes I'd switch it up too, and I'd go to 9 Mile Coffee Company,
Mm,
which, oh my gosh, delicious. I miss them a lot. And then I'd spend a day at Schroon Lake on that beach.
yeah. Screw Lake is
Mm,
really, really pretty. It's,
Yeah.
stunning.
9 Mile Coffee refers to the length of the lake, which is 9 miles. When I was a kid, I had a friend whose family owned a house on the eastern shore that you could only access by boat. And that was a really cool experience too. So, listener, if
I
you're
know the house. I know the very house.
Listener, if you are thinking about coming to part of the Adirondacks that's a little less traveled than your typical Lake George or Lake Placid, there's maybe not as many things to do in Skern Lake, but there's plenty to do. And it's
Mhm.
it's actually really well located between places like Fort Ticonderoga and places in Lake George, but it's absolutely lovely. So I think that's the first tangent we've managed to get through this podcast. Stephen and I are famous for getting off on tangents on these things. So, and I guess my last question for you, Kate, well, not my last question, but for young singers who dream of
Mhm.
doing what you're doing,
Oh.
what advice would you give them about staying inspired and staying grounded and staying motivated?
That's a great question. I can speak to what has helped me stay grounded, and that is just reminding myself of who I am as a person, first and foremost. I think it's really important to have your own identity of self because whenever you're going to go and share stories with other people, you really need to know that story. And you really need to know everything you want to say to somebody. Otherwise, why are you speaking to them? Why are you
Hmm.
sharing that with them? At the end of the day, it's such a talent to be able to sing and read music and have all of these tools at your disposal. But if you're not saying something to someone, just as if I were sitting here talking to a friend or talking about something that's really important to me, I don't know what to do without that sincerity and without that understanding of what you're trying to tell somebody.
I say that they come up here they think they're coming up here to learn to sing and perform, but they come up here to learn who they are and to find out who they are as a person. And we really want that to happen because, as Kate says, how can you be authentic if you don't know your own authentic self? And so
Absolutely.
we could talk for another hour. We have classes in how to maintain relationships. What do you do if you want to have a family and you're a successful career? You've got to be on the road for 11 months. So we really try to help them think about everything and what it is to be, but an artist who is also a human being and a member of society.
Hmm.
That's great. I mean, also, these are life lessons. You could teach class to anybody about those things.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That's great. Seagle Music Colony is a not-for-profit 501c3 tax exempt. How can people support you?
A very small portion of our budget obviously is through ticket sales or even tuition. We're still a tuition-based system company, even though all of the singers have substantial scholarships, and many of them have full scholarships. But we accept donations, and we have some corporate support here. We have some government support, but really we survive by the goodwill of the people who give us their gift. And so you can donate at seaglefestival.org right online. You can call me and I will help you do that. But we live by the wonderful, wonderful gifts of the people of this community and around the world. Our alumni are a huge source of help as well because they've been through the program. They know how important it is. So yeah, I'm not only the artistic director, I'm the development director. So I got to raise all the money for everybody else to
That's
spend.
two jobs. That's
Two jobs.
You know, is the current environment challenging? Have you lost any funding lately that you know
Yeah,
about?
the current is very challenging because the NEA is in a state of the National Endowment for the Arts is in a
Yes.
huge state of limbo. And that will represent, we haven't heard anything yet, but we're pretty sure that like everybody else, we were not funded. That will be a $25,000 hole in this budget. And we are a small company. Also, we would have been usually writing our NEA grant for this cycle in July. Those requirements and those things have not gone out yet. So our guess is that that money will not be available. So we're looking at a $50,000 loss that we will have to overcome.
That hurts.
It does. It's why when I leave here, I'm going to go meet with a donor because that's what I do. Happily, though, I don't think that fundraising is a chore. I really believe in this community. I believe in what we're doing, and I consider it a huge honor to ask people to support the mission of Seagle Festival and all the artists that are literally all over the world, not only in singing positions, but in administrative positions, lawyers, doctors. So many people have come through here that are in and are not in the business that have said that this was a life-changing summer. And so asking someone to invest in a life-changing summer for some artists, I'm all over it.
That's great. And I think it's worth mentioning again, the website Seagle Festival, SEAGLE festival.org. Right at the top navigation, you'll see the support button. Click on that and you'll learn about the different ways that you can support this very worthy organization. Okay, before we let you out into the wilderness and the
I know it's
forest,
coming.
you know it's coming. Your way of giving back to our audience is sharing, you know, your favorite spot in the Adirondacks. And I know, Kate, you haven't, you know, grown up here or whatever, but having spent 2 summers and you already tossed out a couple of names. But we ask our guests to provide, you know, their insider tip. And it can be anything from a hiking trail to, as you said, a coffee place, to a paddle, to a beach. You know, people have said everything from the Great Escape down in the Southern Adirondacks to OK
Right.
Falls to the Racket Lake Navigation Company. It can be anything. It just can't be the Seagle Festival. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay.
So, Darren, you want to go first? Because it sounds like you've been thinking about this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. And also I was the president of the Screen Lake Chamber for a while, so I'm really all about all of Screen Lake. But I got to say, we have so much here. But one thing that I really love is sneaking away on a Saturday morning and going to the Screen Lake Farmers Market, which is only
Yeah.
really 3 years old
Yeah.
now. Alexis Smith, it was her dream, and she did it. And I was just there on Saturday, and the community's there, and you can have coffee, and you can meet people and shop a little bit, but it's a microcosm of this beautiful community all right there into the pavilion. You can see the lake and you can see all the other beautiful things that we have. But I would say that my secret gem is the farmers market.
Yeah. Farmers markets in the Adirondacks. Actually, we just published the Cornell Cooperative Extension and Adirondack Harvest published a full list of, there's something like over 65 farmers markets in the Adirondacks on our website. So you can go and take a look and find out where your local farmers market is. But that Scroon Lake Farmers Market's really turned into something big. It's under that big pavilion
Yeah.
overlooking the lake, and they've got everything, not just the produce and the farm stuff, which is the heart of it, but also great crafts, ready-made
Booze.
foods, booze, exactly. Nothing wrong. I think War Cannon Spirits,
Canon spirits,
who've been
absolutely.
on our podcast before, and are doing great stuff up in Crown Point. That's a great one. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Okay, Kate, what do you got for us?
Oh, I've named so many places I love. I feel like my favorite, absolute favorite place that I can't ever stop thinking about is that one hike that we did, Darren, where we went to Fishhawk Cliffs.
Oh yeah, Indian Head.
Yeah, that one was
Um,
stunning. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that one because the whole hike up there is like these little waterfalls and you're surrounded by these super tall trees and then you make it out there and then there's just this huge ravine and this beautiful water and if you look close enough you can see people on the water. Yeah, it was beautiful. I
that's
also love
awesome.
Paradox Brewery.
No.
Love Paradox Brewery.
We love that place too. And I can't say I've made that hike before, but we'll check it out. But Paradox Brewery is another gem at the northern end of Scroon Lake,
Mm-hmm.
above where the old frontier town used to be, which is probably before, definitely way before your time, Kate. And they've just expanded, and that's a great place to go year round. I love
Yeah.
going there in the fall because of the views they have and the foliage. It's great. And they have great beer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
cool. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Darren and Kate, I want to thank you so much for being terrific guests. I've learned more about Seagle Festival as I continue to learn more and more about Seagle Festival. I can't wait to get over there this summer. And Kate, we wish you all the best at Opera Saratoga, and we are going to keep our eye on you because it seems like you're going places and getting through your forest, which I think
Yeah.
is really wonderful. So thanks, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks. We'll see you at a
Thank
show.
you.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye, you guys.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was a really interesting conversation. So
Yeah,
many layers to the Seagull Festival that I hadn't realized before.
absolutely. I really, as all these conversations so far have been, I'm always amazed at how much there's to offer in the
Yeah,
beautiful Adirondacks.
in the beautiful
It's really,
Adirondacks.
really
The
cool.
stunning 6 million acre park.
Yeah, we didn't get that in until just now. Wow, I think it's the longest we've gone without you having to mention that.
I actually mentioned it in the intro, but you never pay attention, so that's okay.
What? Hey, to what?
I mentioned it in the intro. You didn't pay attention. Oh,
To
shut
what?
up. Shut up, Stephen. Okay.
All right.
One thing we didn't talk about, I mean, I had still had questions we didn't even get to, but listener, check out our events calendar. We'll list when their performances are at Seagull Festival, but they also get around. They will do performances at the Sembrick, which is another great, it's an opera museum and performance space in Bolton Landing. It's actually stunning, but they'll perform there. He mentioned that they're performing at the community church in Scroon Lake. sometimes they pop up at places like they did a preseason preview at Paradox Brewery a couple years ago. So,
Oh, well. And they do
uh,
the youth one where they go to the libraries you mentioned.
yeah, so that it's really cool. So check out our events calendar. We try and get stuff like that on there so that people can take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about going up in for their first set of performances in July. I'm a great fan of the Pirates of Pittsburgh, but the first opera I ever saw live was Pirates of Penzance, and I enjoyed it immensely.
I did not know this about you. Where did you see the Pirates of Penzance performed?
Schenectady
Pray
Light Opera
tell.
Company, I think, or it
Ah,
might have been Civic Players. I can't remember which one, but I was in high
ah.
school. I took a young lady to see. Thought I'd impress her, and I enjoyed it. And the opera was
I
good too.
can't
No,
believe that.
go ahead.
That is a new one to me. That you, yeah. Listen to you,
Well,
Mr.
thank you.
Charmer.
So maybe we can head up to Pirates of Penzance.
I would love to do that. I spent a summer in Woods Hole working on Penzance Point, so we all have a
Ah,
Penzance pirate connection. So that's
there you go.
interesting. It's a hot one today, and it's only getting
Mm,
hotter this week.
have it happen
So
in June and not
uh,
like I don't know all the rain we've had. I don't know
well, it's
if this
still.
is making up for.
I know, and it's still. There's like literally not a whiff of a breeze anywhere.
No.
And it's humid, so it makes it a little miserable but bearable because unlike many other places, it does cool off at night and allows you to have a chance for a good night of sleep. We've got a lot of fans going on, but I did fire up the old air conditioner last night, which I mean, remember when we were kids, mom and dad would never let us have an air conditioner here.
Yeah, but it was rare. It wasn't an annual event that where we had it so hot and so still at night that we could bear it. And I remember maybe two or three times over the course of our first 15 years there where I'd go down and take a dip in the lake in the middle of the night because it was too warm. But
Yeah,
now it's every summer, and sometimes it's couple stretches in summertime. It's
yeah.
just so warm,
This sounds like it's
unfortunately.
gonna last for a couple of days and then
Yeah,
get more
reasonable and
temperate,
seasonably.
seasonably comfortable. I don't know, whatever the right word is. But things are gearing up for the 4th of July, folks. If you want to see what's happening, check out adktaste.com. We've got our regular events calendar that lists what's happening all year round or coming up. But in particular, we're going to have a feature article on what to do and where to go over Independence Day weekend. And it's really things start on the 3rd and go all the way through the.
Will there be a listing of fireworks displays, perhaps?
Well, yes, you can find out where the fireworks are. Basically, they're everywhere. There's
Literally,
some
sometimes.
literally, but the good news is I was sort of putting together the list last night, and as I said, there's fireworks displays on the 3rd, on the 4th, on the 5th, on the 6th. So it's not
Pick your night.
yeah, it's not all or nothing. Unfortunately, for if you're a dog owner,
Mm,
it's not the greatest thing. People also tend to set off their own fireworks, which do not, especially the ferocious Josie, all 9 pounds of her. Might have to get her what do they call it? A thunder shirt.
yeah.
She does not like the fireworks, so
No,
that should be
none of them do.
interesting. Not a fan. Not a fan.
I wonder how it affects the loons. Remember we were talking about the with the
I
loon
don't
control.
know.
If it
I did the.
upsets the
It's
how it
got
upsets the
to.
wildlife. I would imagine it's not something they're used to.
It's got to.
All right, let's get
Important to think
going.
about. Okay.
You're
So, listener, thank you again for tuning into 80K Taste. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I can't see how you wouldn't, please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps others discover the great insights and information about the Adirondacks. And for more exclusive content and local insights, Visit 80keytaste.com. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter so you never miss an update. We publish just once a week, so it's not spammy, and we're not going to fill up
Keep
your
sending
inbox.
those emails.
Yeah, actually, Steve and I, we've been looking at emails and are putting together an episode that sort of like a reader mailbag. So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. But until next time, keep exploring and sampling all that's fabulous in the Adirondacks. Take care and bye.
Take care. Thanks for listening, Frankfurt.